Hey, everybody. We are talking podcasts today. And the tool I want to use to talk podcasts to start is Brisk. Awesome, easy to use podcast generating tool. But I'm also going to show you NotebookLM also has a podcast tool built in. So just a really quick look at that just to differentiate between the two, but the focus really will be on Brisk here. So creating a podcast, you can take any material that you have that the Brisk extension is going to work with and create a podcast from that material, sort of a lively give and take between two hosts educating, teaching that material. I'm just going to show you a few different sources that I use the podcast tool with, and then you can kind of take it from there. It's super, super easy to do this. So let me go ahead and I'm going to start with a website. So if I wanted my students to read this article, that might be one way that I could distribute this information. The other thing that I could do is to turn this into a podcast. Again, a lively conversation between two hosts presenting this material in the podcast format. All I'm going to do to generate that is I've got my little Brisk extension guy here. He traditionally is going to live down in that bottom right corner of your screen. But as you can see from what I'm doing right now, that is relocatable. So you can move it anywhere on your screen you want that to be. I'm going to click on the Brisk extension to bring up my resource tool here. And I'm going to turn off these little reminders, but I want to create. And podcast is listed among the popular tools, so often it will be up towards the top. If it is not, you can just scroll down to try and find it in the list of other resources that Brisk is able to create. So I'm going to click on a podcast here, and you can see I've got 3 different little steps to go through here, real quick and simple. So I'm going to click on the next button. So here is where I'm going to start to fill in some information. So it auto fills that I do want an educational podcast about this web page, and I'm not going to ask it about the American Revolution. I'm not sure why it's trying to autofill that, but I might say something about. Well, no, I think that's good. I could add to that. Let me just sort of get with it here. So the podcast is going to be 1 to 2 minutes in length. If you're on the basic version, that's, I think, the limit that you can go with. If you are on the pro version, you can choose up to a 5-minute podcast. That's probably hitting the length of time you want for it anyway. But as you can see, we don't have the institutional license, so that 9 to 10-minute option I don't think is available to you. I've never tried to make one that long, but there you go. So I'm going to just do 1 to 2 minutes because I want it to generate quickly. And then you also here can change the grade level that you want it to be at. I'm going to stick with my 11th grade level. Okay. And then I'm going to just go ahead and Brisk that. And hopefully that American Revolution element was not in there. And this is what it starts to look like as it is generating that podcast. Let me get myself out of the way here. And you can see as my timer starts to increase, it is increasing the length of time of that podcast. And here is where you can see that podcast generating. While it's generating, let me give you a quick tour of this screen. So this is the podcast, and you can see here's that lively debate or discussion between two people. I've got Maya and I've got James. Each of these little text fields is editable. So if you see something you want to change, you see it. I mean, it's AI generated, so you've got to double check the information, make sure it's all correct, change anything you want to change. It'll read whatever is there. So if you change it, it'll read what you put there. To change that, I simply am going to click on that little edit button. Okay. And what I love about Brisk podcasts is that it creates this visual screen so that as students are listening to the podcast, they can also read along with the screen. And I think that that's really huge. Okay. I think it's done because I asked for a 1 to 2 minute podcast. So I'm going to go ahead and click the play button.
Hey everyone, I'm Maya,
I got my
and
sister.
today we're exploring something really interesting: how the problems of the Gilded Age, that's the late 1800s, are showing up again in our world today.
I'm James. So what exactly was the Gilded Age? It sounds fancy, but it wasn't.
Okay, I'm going to pause. I just wanted to get it long enough that you could hear from both Maya and James. So you get that. There's all sorts of different characters that Brisk creates for us. So this time I got Maya and James. Other things you're able to do, change the title if you want it. You can rename it to something that fits with your language that you use in your class. The transcript can be hidden if we don't want it. It can be sped up or it can be slowed down. And then most importantly, how are you going to share this out with your students? It's simply clicking on this link button. And now I've got a link to this podcast page copied, and I could put that on Canvas. The other really cool thing about Brisk is that you can continue to kind of brisk it, right? So I could take this podcast and now I can brisk this podcast and say, create a quiz of this podcast. So maybe I want them to listen to the podcast and do a 5-question exit ticket to ensure do a check for understanding of, or a recall activity or whatever, right? So you can continue to build on this podcast using Brisk. So just to touch on that aspect of Brisk, that's one of the cool things about it. Okay, so there's a podcast. Now, as I said, you can use multiple sources for this. So another tool I'll use sometimes, this is my textbook. Let me sign back in again. I'm sorry. This is my textbook resource for my courses, just U.S. history this year. So let me head in there. And sometimes what I will do with material is take these, they have a lesson summary. Okay. And rather than a reading assignment, just for, some diversity, I can then brisk this and create a podcast. Again, here's my steps. Um, okay. I'm sure it would be okay if I didn't spell right, but that's fine. And I'm going to go 4 to 5 minutes. And maybe I want to raise the grade level reading. Maybe I want to make it more difficult. So I could come in and say, can you do this at a 12th grade reading level? And I'm going to brisk it. Okay, same thing is going to happen. I'm going to pop away from that and let that generate because it does take a minute. I mean, it's not a long time, but it does take a minute. Another use I've had is I've actually, and this seems like it might be redundant, but I have created podcasts off of YouTube videos, and that is possible. Again, anywhere I see this little guy, my Brisk guy, I can create anything from this material. So sometimes I have found a podcast where I love the content, I love the message, I'm not jazzed up about the presentation. And so I've come in here and I have created, now it does have to have a transcript. So if you come across a YouTube video that didn't have a transcript, you might not be able to generate material from that. What you do see is that it is not in my popular tool. So I do have to scroll down to find it in this case, just because it's probably not very common for somebody to want to make a podcast off of a YouTube video. Okay. But just know that that's there. Okay. So that's it. That's the generating of a podcast using Brisk. As always, if you have any questions about that, just let me know and I can help walk through that. Let's take a look just real quick. I think this was the one I asked it to make from my.
Welcome to History Unpacked, the podcast where we dive deep into the stories that shaped America. I'm Amara, and today we're exploring one of the most difficult and tragic periods in American history, the pressure placed on American Indian nations during the late 1800s.
I'm Marcus.
Okay. So again, a little bit more interesting, a little bit more, interactive for kids as opposed to reading the textbook. So it just gives you an option. Last thing I want to show you, and I know this is getting to be a long video, so if you're still with me, awesome. But NotebookLM is another tool that does have a podcast feature to it. I'm just going to quickly show you one. I'm not going to go into how I made that, but if you want help with that and you like what you see with NotebookLM, just let me know. So I'm going to go into an existing notebook and I'm just going to, and it's my audio overview is what they're called in NotebookLM. And I'm just going to play one. That's all I'm going to do. So you can get the difference. Okay.
And the political scene then was just chaotic. You had years of ineffective leadership, parties basically falling apart or changing shape.
Right. And leading into this election, you don't just have 2 main candidates. You've got 4 serious contenders.
4. And that really stemmed.
All right. So that's talking about the election of 1860 where Abraham Lincoln is elected. What I like about NotebookLM podcasts, I actually like the characters better. I just think that they sound a little bit richer voices. It just sounds a little bit more real, a little bit less AI generated. What I don't like about it is I don't have that transcript for the student to follow. So pros and cons of both, but just know you've got both of those resources to create podcasts. I think that's it. As always, if you have any questions or need any help with creating these, linking these, distributing these, please make sure to let me know. Thanks.